Well, a very good evening to you. Welcome to Candid Conversations with Tess. Tonight we are talking about in-laws, and joining us in studio is Mr. and Mrs. Oduor. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about yourself. Maybe we can start with Mrs. Oduor.
Thank you. So my name is Cynthia Waga. Is Oduor, married to one man called Jeko. Yeah. Blessed with 2 children, a son and a daughter. We've been married for 17 years.
Great.
Yeah, almost 18. Yeah.
Please tell us about yourself, Mr. Oduor.
Yeah, so thank you, Tess, for having us. My name's Jacob Oduor. We've been married to Cynthia for now getting to 18 years. Just to add to what she said, 2 kids, a boy and a girl. The boy is 17 years. Yeah, the girl is now getting to 12 years almost.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for making time. And you also deal with couples. Maybe tell us a bit of what you do in terms of counseling couples.
Okay. So we are in a group within Nairobi. It's a cell group that belongs to Nyanza Evangelistic Team, which is currently referred to as Net Ministries Trust. So we have a cell group, normally referred to as Far East Cell Group. We are in a couples group. And within that couples group, we are the leaders. Yeah, so basically leading the couples ministry within the cell group.
Great.
Yeah.
So let's get into it in terms of once people get married, it's inevitable. You have in-laws. So what can people do in terms of creating boundaries to foster a good relationship with the father-in-law, with the mother-in-law? Sometimes you might even find that since the dowry payment, there might have been even a tiff during that time. How do you start now building that relationship? Let's start with Saudu.
Okay, so thank you. I think the first thing that we must always remember is that the marriage is between the 2 of you. Yeah, so all these other people, including siblings, in-laws, extended in-laws, parents, are supposed to be strangers in the marriage. Yeah, so the commitment for the sustainability of the marriage must be between the 2 of you. Yeah, so what does that mean? Anybody who is coming into the marriage as in-laws need to have boundaries. Yeah, but we also must remember that these are people related to us. There are some of them like siblings who we must always support. And there are different ways of supporting. So there are some people, and it's not good to be prescriptive at this point. There are some people who prefer to support within their own house, and there are some people who prefer to support from afar. So what works for you? You need to discuss between the 2 of you and agree what works for you, and implement that with the in-laws.
Okay, so Mrs. Oduor, what about in case of a place where you've gotten married, different tribes? We have different traditions. We even have a language barrier. How do you navigate that?
I think still going back on the issue of boundaries, because there's need for the 2 of you to ensure that you define what are the boundaries in terms of the rules of staying with us, the rules in terms of who helps us even make some decisions. But when the 2 of you understand that the marriage is between the 2 of you, you will always have to understand that as much as there are some people who have talked, some people who have told us, my mother told me this, my uncle told me this, my brother, this is what they feel, then we need to understand and come to a compromise based on what we, the 2 of us, think is appropriate for us. So the boundaries need to be set clear. And then the boundaries also, as he said, when someone comes to stay in with you, now that is where you also look at the background. Because you can't just agree, coming from maybe a tribe or a race where we are not used to staying with somebody in their house and they feel like all these people are, infringing my space and so on and so forth. you need now to understand each other. That's why the agreement should come between the two of you rather than being forced from outside. So that is also a boundary. Who tells us who comes to spend, maybe stay with us, who comes to live with us. And it is not a must that you also live with them, because assisting is there. You will always assist. If there is a place that they can stay away from you, it is still okay. If you can be able to take them, it also acts as a way of discipling. You are able to get more people within your family. And sometimes if you are born again, you are able even to inculcate and even lead them to Christ. So the boundaries need to be stated in terms of the rules of engagement, in terms of how many sometimes will stay with us, because you can't also take everybody from your uncles, you know, your nephews, even if they are younger than you or even the older ones. To what extent do you assist them? And to what extent do you stay with them? So if you are coming from different cultural background, you need to take that into consideration as you discuss.
So still on the issue of assisting, Mr. Odur, there is this part of finances where most couples assist. For example, a man was the sole supporter or major supporter of the family where he's coming from. How do you now transition to be able to support the new family with your new wife and also your family that you had before? So in terms of help, assisting families and also distributing in terms of shopping. As you go to the ladies' side, you carry a certain amount of shopping. And then maybe to the man's side, you just go with a small paper bag. Tell us on how to navigate that area of finances.
Yeah, okay, so the first thing that will determine what the size of the bag that you carry is the need on both sides. But even before that, normally as a couple you need to sit down together at the beginning to determine your boundaries, setting the boundaries. What can you support on this side? What are the needs on this side? What are the needs on this side? You sometimes find that on my side, maybe I have so many siblings behind me, and maybe my parents also need to be supported, and that may not be the case on their side. So we need to sit down and agree that maybe on a monthly basis, this is what we are supposed to give to my side, and maybe that is not necessary on her side. And that agreement then defines how you engage with your parents, your siblings, and the extended family. And it is always good to define what exactly are you able to support. Are you able to support everything? So is it education? Is it medical? Is it maybe your auntie has a charmer that she is hosting? Are you able to chip in for entertaining those guests? Those agreements need to be made between the two of you, so that when you are doing a contribution or support to one side, the other person must know and must understand that you are supporting that amount based on the need that is there on the other side.
Okay.
Yeah, I think maybe to come in there, he's talked about asking yourself as a couple, what are the priority areas that you'd want to fund? Because you also can't fund everything. Because the resources that you have in most cases, especially if you've just gotten married, you really have to readjust and know that now there's a wife, this is a family you are starting, and you need to think about the future. So as much as you're getting a salary, you also need to, save something for the future, because you're also planning maybe there are children to come in future and so on and so forth. So sometimes you'll have to readjust your budget. You'll have to readjust the amount that you are sending. You might have to readjust who else you are going to assist, and some things might not be a priority. So that you also don't just enable them to always be asking money from you. You can be saying maybe it's just fees, and maybe give them something small for shopping, or even shop for them, depending on the need. There are families that do not need the money, but there are those ones that need money. So the finances, but then there are also other needs that might not necessarily be finances. Yeah, like for instance, our case, we started by saying we'll be giving both parents something at the end of the month. And we decided it's a standing order. And so as much as we're giving on this other end, we're also giving on this other end. But when it comes to academics, when there are many, and us, we only had one. So we cannot compete that because you are 10, we have, as you educate the others, you also educate, I start looking for cousins.
Collecting cousins.
And, many other people. No, because it's not a competition. Then later on along the line, my mom was working, her mom wasn't working. So you look at it from the financial point of view, my place, they're able, but you really have to support more. But come 2016, my mom gets a stroke. She has to retire. So you see the need now changes. So now the need is even more on this other end, while most of his siblings have cleared. So you really can't, there should not be a competition. That is because this side you are helping, we also need. Marriage is companionship, it's not competition. Yeah.
Wow.
But just to add, defining what you are able to do as a couple is so important. And developing the ability to say no, including to your own parents and your siblings, on things that are outside the boundaries that you have defined to support, is so important. Because otherwise you will be borrowing to meet other people's needs. It gets to a point where you have created a dependency habit in the people, that they don't look it anymore as a privilege, but as a right. That if you don't give me what I'm asking, it is your problem.
And there's also the factor of one partner in the marriage being the one who is sending money secretly. Is like he has people know the person is soft. So somehow, maybe it might be the lady, it could be the man, that people approach on the side. To me, 5,000, I have an emergency. And then maybe sometimes the spouse just sends without consulting. What would you say in terms of what the person can do to be able to manage in the future such needs?
Okay, so openness is so important. I think this is something we have to always develop from the beginning. You don't want to start to wait until the second, third year before you start thinking about being open to your spouse. This is a discussion that must start. It's the core of the marriage. So, and being vulnerable to the other person, including on our weaknesses. My weakness to always empathize with people's needs and just throw money is something that I need to talk with my spouse and discuss, and she or he supports me on how to deal with it. But also importantly, other than that, you need to set goals and commit your money, so that you rarely have money that is just floating, so that anybody calls you, if somebody calls you for support, you will genuinely not have the money to give out. So that also helps if you get yourself in a situation where you always send money without the other person's knowledge, then it helps a lot.
Okay, let's switch gear a bit to this question of people have gotten married. A few months down the line, in-laws start asking, hey, when are we becoming grandparents? For example, the mother-in-law, the father-in-law. Ninazaliwa lini? You know, that question. Tell us how to deal with such pressure from the in-laws.
Okay, I think it's important for the man to always support the lady, so that as you had discussed earlier, maybe while dating, sometimes you even discuss how long into your marriage that you might need children, so that if there come cases where some in-laws are asking questions, even the man or the person now from the side of the in-laws can be able to stand up and say, we are still not yet ready. You know, there is need for support by each other, so that you do not, go in because, or you decide that now let me just give birth because I need to please other people. If the two of you had agreed we have to wait for 2 years, then you can still continue on and wait for the 2 years, because you really have to be strong. The two of you need to stand for each other, and it is very important. In case of a situation where it is because of medical issues, and maybe you go 1 year down the line, 2 years, and there's no child, there's need still for the support of your spouse. Because the moment your spouse gives in also to the pressure, then it somehow tries to strain the marriage. So there's need for both of you to be able to understand that if it is a medical issue, let us support each other, let us go to the hospital, let us get as much help as we can, but the marriage will still be complete even without. So do not just yield to the pressure, or do not, feel like now my marriage is going to break, or my marriage is not a marriage, a full marriage, because there are no children. Yeah.
Yeah. You see, other than the support that you are supposed to get from the other spouse, as an individual, you have to develop you have to say no sometimes to these kind of pressures, because it's not just the pressure that is coming because you're looking for kids or they are looking for kids that you still don't have. It could be pressure, financial pressure, for instance. You have been used to giving people a certain amount of money and they still want you to do that when you are married. So as an individual, you must develop the habit of saying no, without really feeling guilty, because then that helps you to focus on what is important for the two of you. And the discussion between the two of you is so important to drive or to deflect all those pressures that are not helpful for the marriage. Yeah.
What about the holidays? Most of the time, Christmas holidays have come, and there are couples who have had, it's been a challenge where they have not visited the woman's side, for example, in years.
Yeah.
It's always the holidays are for the man's side. They're always expected there. How can they handle going forward so that they can balance on both sides? Start with whoever can.
Yeah. I think holidays are important periods of time, especially to meet with families. And the moment that you realize that in a marriage, it is two families that have come together. As much as it is two individuals, but then there's also the family aspect of the in-laws, trying also to support us in the marriage. There are some who might not really be in support of the marriage, but there are some who will support. But for you to be able to integrate in both sides, it is important that you also do visit both sides, so that there is a balance. You don't just lean on one side and say, yes, I left my family and I'm no longer going to be visiting them. So it's important that you be able to allocate the time that you have, because relationships are built through time, spending time with each other, spending time with the families. Your children need to know their cousins, they need to know who their aunties are, and sometimes it is during these holidays that people have the family get-togethers. So in case there's a get-together on this other side, as the man, I would always advise that, you also go with your wife, even if you feel uncomfortable. Sometimes you can even go for a day and leave them there, so that they can also enjoy and understand that your children also need to bond on this other end. Because you never know. Things happen, the two of you might go, where will your children go? And sometimes you also go on this other end, because maybe that is where you even have a family home. So you need to try and see how to balance your time out. Yeah, so that the holidays are spent to build relationships.
Yeah, you see, the beauty of marriage is a union between two adults. I mean, the law doesn't allow children to get married. So if you are two adults who have agreed to work together long term, and I mean, there are differences. You have Christian couples, you have non-Christian couples, so both ways. It should be the case that people listen to the other people's needs, right? So and my wife's, one of the needs is to always keep close to the family. I should be able to understand, first of all, that that is something that she needs to have when we go home. But importantly, when we get into a marriage relationship with her, her people become my people, and my people become her people. So unless I'm so autocratic, I should be able to consider her parents, her mother, as my own mother. So I don't see how, if I take it that way, that I would fear getting into my mother's house. And if I'm passing by my mother's house, how I cannot pass by to say hi. Of course, there are differences in culture. Some places you say, oh, the son-in-law is supposed to have 50 meters distance. You are not supposed to say hi.
Yeah.
So those considerations are always there. I don't think they should be a big focus in Christian marriages. But if you think those are important for you as a man, because I think it's the men who are more affected here, then at least consider that family as your own family, where you can always pass by. You don't have to spend there, but just pass by to see how they are doing. And at the very least, if you value the marriage, allow your wife to go and spend time with them. Yeah, because it's not a military camp. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it's not a military camp, if you have a consensus to work together in marriage, then you must understand that this is something that is important to the other spouse.
Well said. So even as we wind up, please give us your parting shot as you tell us, maybe you can touch a bit on, there is this connection between maybe mother and son. And now the man has gotten married, and there is this attachment. Sometimes the lady with the father. As you give us your parting shot, please tell us on how to put healthy boundary in terms of it is not always that the mother-in-law has to consent or the father-in-law has to consent to some decisions between the two of you. Maybe let's start with Mrs. Oduor.
Okay, thank you. So I think it's always good to tread carefully, because this is someone who brought him up, and this is someone who gave birth to him, and it's someone very integral in his life. And I remember my first instance of meeting her. In fact, he even told me, if my mom doesn't like you,
Wow.
yes, I don't think the relationship would go on. And somehow, to some extent, it is much easier for you to understand if you're already a mother and you have a son. You understand the connection, and you also let them have their time. You also let them have their way to some extent, so that you also do not fight, like, compete for things, because you understand that you are the wife, you are not the mother. Let him be mothered by somebody else who is the mother, the biological mother, and let you be the wife to enjoy the benefits of being a spouse. And there are some decisions, maybe at home and some other places, that you also let her have a say as the mother, so that you also don't always have to be fighting. So knowing your place would also really assist, so that there is no friction between the two of you. But then when you also understand that she can also be your mother, because it's not every person who has a mother. And sometimes when you enter into such and you are able to understand that this is someone who can also be my mother, and you treat them as your mom, because it depends with how you will treat them. So even if they were hostile at first, somehow it diffuses that tension that might have been there. You just expect that, yes, as much as maybe she will say this and that, she's still my mom. I will still visit. If I was going to see my mom, I will still buy some things for her. I would still tell her, I love you. And when you speak words of encouragement to them, even if they are speaking curses to you, somehow they come to the realization that this person has not come to take away my son, but they have come to compliment and help my son to be a better person.
Yeah, I think, again, let me just emphasize that this is a marriage between two adults. So if you are two adults, then you must withdraw from overdependence on your mother or, your parents.
Yeah.
But I think men sometimes overdepend on their mother's advice.
Yeah.
So withdrawing from that, I understand there are some people who, over time, this is the only person they have always consulted, and they tend to consult them after marriage. There are some women, specifically focusing on men, there are some women or wives who may not mind that you always have to consult your mother. If she doesn't say yes, then that decision is just dead. But if your wife has an issue with that, then it is important that you sit down, agree on how to move forward with that. And there are some parents who are really very intrusive, and they want their way to always be the way in your life. In that kind of a situation, you need to talk to them in a way that doesn't show them any kind of disrespect. It shouldn't be confrontational, but telling them, get a setting and just talk to them that, this is now our marriage. You have to respect it. Some decisions will not be according to what you want, but this is our life now. In a respectful way, in a way that they still feel they are part of your life. You can consult them, but you always don't have to take their advice.
Great. Parting shot?
So my parting shot just comes from that. The marriage, of course, is just between the two of you. Anybody else is a stranger, really. So actually including the children. So making it work just depends on the two of you. Any pressures that come from any strangers, including your parents, can only break the marriage if you allow it to break the marriage.
Your parting shot?
Yeah, I think my parting shot is that the two families need to come together and allow each other to operate in their areas of strengths rather than always pinpointing each other's weaknesses. Yeah, so it's important that you realize that, yes, you are married, it's a new government you are forming, but then also there's still the attachment that you still have with your in-laws and also your own family, extended family. So it's important to try and see in what ways can we be able to help each other and merge as one bigger family. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. and Mrs. Oduor, for making time for us and your insightful sentiments. I believe that you, viewer, are enlightened and educated on a few things that you might have been wondering about. Well, that's where we conclude Candid Conversations tonight. Don't worry, we will be back next week with another conversation with this wonderful couple on parenting. For now, have a good night.